Welcome to the SAGES Climate Science Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Young, environmental scientist and science communicator. SAGES is the Scottish Alliance for Geoscience Environment and Society. Over the next 10 episodes, we are going to be doing a deep dive into climate science with scientists from across Scotland with many different institutions who are all part of our network. We'll be looking at the cryosphere, that's snow and ice, flooding, cities, communities, peat, soil, underground environments, and so much more. We're going to be looking at what is climate change doing to Scotland and how do we mitigate and adapt? How do we change to live with climate change? And also how can we strive to be making climate change better? I have so many guest lines up for you and I'm looking forward to going on this journey with you.
We did some research recently where Edinburgh Castle was flooded. And if anyone's been to Edinburgh, you'll know that it's on top of a hill.
Yeah.
So not necessarily the place that everyone thinks is going to get flooded.
Should we not be planting trees?
Well, I think the common phrase is the right tree in the right place.
Okay.
Peatlands aren't the right place.
What is the point in a country like Scotland doing anything for climate when you've got huge emitters like China, America and other big states?
And once you put it in numbers, it's very impressive because if you think about peatlands worldwide, they cover around 3% of the surface of the earth, and they store more carbon than the world's forests.
So whether we're in Antarctica or whether we're in Scotland, we're actually all experiencing these global processes and we all have an influence on them and they have an influence on us.
Soil is on Earth and it is the most important entity. Well, I would say that being a soil scientist, wouldn't I?
I think we're quite lucky because actually there's pockets around the world where air pollution, it's almost like a runaway train.
Cardiovascular, our heart health, respiratory is our lung health, neurological. So people experiencing depression, as you might if you live in really unhappy surroundings.
When we're assessing the potential of geothermal energy, we usually break it up into sort of theoretical potential, which is basically just how much thermal energy is stored in the ground. A lot. The technical potential, which is, well, how much can we actually extract? And then there's the economic potential.
You type in your address and it actually shows you for each type of flooding whether you're at risk.
This is also what my research has shown. So in some of the articles which I've managed to publish, I've shown like in the maps that air pollution is usually blown toward the east coast.
These tools are there to help us. We need to learn how to use them properly and train people how to use things like ChatGPT in a good way. It can make code for you. And that's great. It means you don't have to write lumps of code all over again. But, let's not forget, these skills are really, really good for people to have.
So Scotland's climate is changing. We've seen an increase in annual rainfall since the 1970s, where generally we're seeing milder, wetter winters and hotter, drier summers. So the 10 warmest years on record in Scotland have occurred since 1997.
So there's billions of people across the world who rely on glaciers and mountains for their year-round water supply. So the Himalayas are sometimes known as the third pole because they have the highest concentration of glaciers outside of the Arctic and Antarctica.
Do you think we're wrong to be assuming that Scotland always has rain and always has too much water?
Well, I mean, every time I go out to hike or something, I will complain that it's raining and there's far too much water.
It's like plastic, actually. Plastic is fantastic.
Absolutely.
It just never disappears. So we use it totally inappropriately. And I actually first came across forever chemicals not through anything scientific, but through the movie Dark Waters.
One of the things we're seeing now is what we might call increased flood compression, which is where you get a flood event followed by another flood event.
If we were to stop for a moment, take a deep breath, take another deep breath, take a third deep breath, take a fourth deep breath. Two of those breaths, that oxygen that we're breathing in, that we're dependent on, has actually been produced by plants in the ocean.
When I turn my tap on, where is my water coming from?
It definitely varies depending on where you live. The majority of people, when they turn on their tap, it's going to be provided from Scottish water.
Why is this good? This is good because sewage sludge is a byproduct of the wastewater treatment, and then it's unavoidable. So while people on the earth, they're going to generate wastewater, that wastewater, if we want clean environment, needs to be treated.
And as you say, Fatima, it's also a lot of these communities that, because of that, because of these multiple layers of problems, have been kind of further pushed down the list and are most vulnerable to not just air pollution nowadays.
So if viewers know the Day After Tomorrow movie, then that's based on science that was started here in Scotland.
I think it is about communicating that, isn't it? It's finding either how climate is going to impact them or showing them that maybe some of the impacts they actually are seeing are linked.
But is they're in the wrong places? They're there because historically it was important for them to be there, whether it was for shipping or fishing or that type of thing.
Rising seas are a crisis entirely of humanity's making. The world must act and answer the SOS before it is too late.
In putting the gabion baskets in, it's caused a huge bite out of the dunes either side. So it's not actually helping unless we can't be in a situation where the entire coast of Scotland is covered by a 30-foot wall, because something will get over the top of it, because they always do.
There's no question there. We do know that humans are releasing a huge amount of CO2 in many different ways into the atmosphere. And it's not just CO2, there's also methane and other gases.
Members of the public can just go and look at what their coast is doing at any time of day. It's freely available for everyone to look at.
Most, if not all, of Scotland was under hundreds of meters of ice at one point in time. And to think how big or how high hundreds of meters is, and think that it's happened beneath our feet at one point in time, is quite an impressive kind of concept to grasp.
Scotland's history in the area of oceanography was that Sir John Murray set up the first marine station in Scotland in 1884, and that was kind of the birth of oceanography in Scotland.
To understand the impacts that we're going to feel in Scotland, we really need to understand what's going on in the cryosphere, because they have such an impact on feedback systems.
Climate obviously is at the core, at the center of most of our activities, because people often get confused between climate and weather.